Hi everyone, this is Mr. Alto and Mrs. Nowak, and what we're going to do today is through a couple videos, we're going to show you how the Bible came to be, okay? This is really the next unit in our uh, freshman 9 curriculum, okay? So really, we're just taking the lesson that you would have had in class, and we're putting it on Blackboard with a lecture. Obviously, you already know that you need to take some notes, so sit back and relax, and I hope you're ready for me and Mrs. Nowak to talk a lot. So have fun. Okay, let's begin. So, the question of how the Bible came to be. So go to the first slide. Boom, okay? People had to experience God. What does that mean? Think about what we did last unit, all those different types of revelation, okay? People had to experience God through those different revelations that we really sifted through for the first quarter, okay? So people's experience of God is central to this question of how the Bible came to be. So that's really step one, is that people had to experience God first. Here's just a fun little picture, right? I mean, we're talking, here we see a woman with, listening to Jesus. She's having an experience with God, okay? Again, that's basically what we're talking about. All the things that we did really first quarter about how do we experience God, this is all relevant, okay? So that experience of God is key. Okay, let's move on and talk about well, what do you do with these experiences of God? Okay, so people have experiences of God, right? You get pretty pumped up by an experience of God. I know I do. Okay, so what do you want to do? You want to talk about it, right? You want to share these with people. You want to see if other people have other experiences of God that you might not have. You want to, trade stories. You want to trade, different cool things that might have happened to you. Okay, and so when we talk about the ancient people, really the ancient Israelites, the first people to have an experience of this Abrahamic God that we adhere to today. Okay, really, writing wasn't that big back then. So the only way that they were able to communicate these stories to one another was through word of mouth. Okay, we call that communication of word of mouth oral tradition. And as you can see on the slide, oral tradition, I'll read it again for you, is handing on the message of God's saving plan through word of mouth. So that's going to include what? Things like storytelling, preaching, parables, and sacred wisdom. Okay? Okay, let's fast forward a couple generations, right? So the ancient Israelites have experiences of God. They think these experiences of God are cool. They talk about these things. Okay? Again, oral tradition. Well, eventually, and really the only problem with oral tradition is this. How hard is it to remember things that really everyone is telling you? I know I see it in my class, right? I tell you to do an assignment, okay? 5 minutes later, I'm getting like 20 questions asked about what do I have to do? I forget, right? So in oral tradition, if you're just relying on your memory to, capture the true authenticity of these experiences, you might not remember everything. Okay, so eventually, when writing got more popular, and by the time of that Jesus was walking around on the earth, writing was a lot more popular. More people could actually, write. More people knew the alphabet. Written tradition got popular. So written tradition is a synthesis of all those stories being told, and people wrote these, down, and this eventually became different books. So really, when we talk about scripture, really scripture is a perfect example of written tradition, obviously, right? If written tradition is the synthesis of oral tradition, then scripture is the perfect example of that. Okay, so I almost tripped on this chair. So we have scripture, okay, but we also have this thing in the church called tradition. Now don't worry, we're gonna talk more about tradition. We can clear that up for you in class. For right now, I just really want to tell you that scripture and tradition are both necessary in order to feel the most authentic form of truth of God's revelation, okay? Scripture truly developed from traditions, okay? But all the traditions are not in the scripture. Really, you need both scripture and tradition. You need to pay attention and adhere to both scripture and tradition if you want to live out the message of the gospel authentically and fully.